By the year 2169, humans stop aging at 25. But there's a catch. Once they reach that age, a glowing clock appears on their arm, counting down from 1 year. Time is now the world's currency. Work for it, steal it, or die when your clock hits 0. The rich live forever, while the poor fight for every second. Society is split into time zones, with the wealthiest living in luxury in New Greenwich, while the poor struggle to survive in the slums. Will lives in one of those ghettos with his mother, Rachel. Every day is a race against time, literally. They barely have enough hours left to make it through the day. Will considers earning extra time through underground time fighting, but Rachel forbids it. It's too dangerous. Still, Will has a kind heart. Whenever he sees little Maya on the streets, he gives her some of his time, so she can survive another day. Will and his best friend, Burrell, work at a local factory where time is tight. Prices keep rising, wages keep shrinking, and dead bodies. People who run out of time are a common sight on the floor. The company pays them just enough to keep them alive, but never enough to escape poverty. One evening, Will heads to a bar to collect an hour from a guy who owes him. There, he finds Burrell drinking for free, thanks to a mysterious man buying rounds for everyone. The man is Henry, and unlike everyone else in the ghetto, his clock shows a whole century. Will is stunned. What's a rich man doing in a place like this? He warns Henry about the Minutemen, a ruthless gang that steals time from others, but Henry doesn't seem to care. Just as Will feared, the gang's leader, Fortis, arrives and challenges Henry to a time fight. The bar empties in seconds. Will stays hidden watching. Before the fight starts, Henry asks to use the restroom. Only one guard follows him. Will seizes the moment. Knocking the gangster out, he helps Henry escape through the back. They run through the dark streets and hide inside an abandoned factory, locking themselves in for the night. Finally, Will asks the question that's been bothering him. Why would a man with a century of time come to the ghetto? Henry sighs. He's 105 years old, and he's tired of living. Will thinks the whole idea is ridiculous, but Henry just laughs at his naivete. He explains that life in the ghetto is designed to keep people dying, because the rich can only thrive if the poor perish. Eventually, both men fall asleep. The next morning, Henry wakes up first and silently transfers all his remaining time to Will, keeping only 5 minutes for himself. When Will wakes up, he finds a message written on the window. "Don't waste my time." Confused, he looks outside and sees Henry sitting on a bridge just moments before his time runs out. Not realizing he's being watched by security cameras, Will rushes to the bridge to check if Henry is really dead, then quickly flees the scene. Later, he visits his best friend Burrell, bumping into Burrell's wife Greta and their newborn baby. In private, Will gifts Burrell a decade's worth of time, 1 year for every year of their friendship. That evening, Will waits at the bus stop for his mother, Rachel, but she never arrives. Unbeknownst to him, the bus fare increased that afternoon, and with only an hour and a half left on her clock, Rachel couldn't afford the ride home. The only option? A desperate 2-hour walk. She starts running, knowing it's a race against time. Meanwhile, Will realizes something is wrong and takes off running too. They finally spot each other in the middle of the street, arms reaching out. But it's too late. Rachel collapses in Will's arms, her time completely drained. The next morning, the timekeepers, the police force that monitors time transactions, find Henry's body in the river. Agent Leon immediately suspects murder and orders his team to check the security footage. Though the cameras didn't capture the actual fall, they did record Will at the scene. Now, he's the prime suspect. Determined to avenge his mother's death, Will devises a bold plan. He rents a limo, pretending to be a wealthy man who lost his way, and heads toward New Greenwich, the city of the rich. But crossing each border costs a fortune, and only those with deep pockets can afford it. Once in New Greenwich, Will checks into a luxury hotel, catching the attention of high society socialite Sylvia. After resting, he heads to a restaurant, where Sylvia watches him from a distance. The waitress, sensing he doesn't belong, still treats him well, especially when he tips generously. She also gives him a word of advice. If he plans to visit the casino, he'll need better clothes. Will's rapid journey across multiple time zones raises red flags in the system, making it easy for the timekeepers to track his location. Leon, one of the timekeepers, also realizes he has chased Will's father in the past. That evening, Will buys a sharp new suit and heads to a high-end casino. Since he isn't a member, they demand a voluntary donation of a full year's time. Determined, Will joins a poker table where he meets Mr. Weiss, a powerful businessman who loans time and isn't afraid to gamble large amounts. Sitting nearby is Sylvia, Weiss' daughter, who watches the game unfold. with his eyes on Sylvia and his future at stake, will risk everything, betting all the time he has left. His bold move pays off. He wins, impressing Weiss, who invites him to his next exclusive party. The following day, Will splurges on an expensive car and drives to Weiss' luxurious estate. Sylvia, intrigued by Will, asks him to dance. She quickly picks up that he's not from her world and admits she envies the people from the ghetto. Unlike her, they have freedom, while she's constantly surrounded by bodyguards, unable to live life on her own terms. She wishes she could do something reckless, something that actually matters. Seizing the moment, Will takes her hand and leads her to the secluded beach behind the mansion. He dares her to go skinny dipping, something spontaneous and wild. Sylvia hesitates at first, but then joins him in the water. As they float under the night sky, they talk about doing more daring things. But their adventure is cut short when people start searching for Sylvia. She and Will sneak back separately to avoid suspicion. Inside, Weiss invites Will to another poker game, but before they can begin, the timekeepers storm in. They track Will down through his extravagant car purchase. He is taken to a private office for interrogation. Will tries to explain that Henry gave him his time willingly, but the timekeepers refuse to believe him. Instead, they confiscate most of his time, leaving him with only 2 hours to live. Leon notes how much Will reminds him of his father, though Will barely remembers him. As Weiss and Sylvia check in on the commotion, Will takes advantage of the moment. He overpowers the timekeepers, steals a gun, and in a desperate move, grabs Sylvia as a hostage. Together, they escape through the back door and speed away in Will's car. Leon chases Will through the city, ramming his car from behind, but Will fights back. He slams the car into reverse and speeds away. Just as he's about to crash into a truck, he swerves at the last second, barely making it out. Leon, however, isn't as lucky. He slams straight into the truck, giving Will a chance to escape. Will and Sylvia race toward the ghetto. On the way, Will asks her for help, but she refuses. As they approach a bridge, Will gets distracted by security cameras and doesn't see the spike strip on the road. The tires burst, the car crashes, and both of them are knocked unconscious. Minutes later, Fortis and his gang find them. Wasting no time, they begin stealing Sylvia's remaining time. Suddenly, the wail of the timekeeper's sirens fills the air. The gang panics and flees, leaving Sylvia with only 30 minutes to live. When she wakes up and sees the little time she has left, she panics and begs Will for help. He finds it ironic. Just moments ago, she refused to share. But he helps her anyway and takes her into town. Meanwhile, the timekeepers arrive to inspect the wreck. But before anything, Leon asks for his daily time payment. He never carries more than he needs. Realizing Will reach out sooner or later, Leon decides to stop chasing him. Desperate for help, Will goes to see his friend Burrell, but Burrell's wife, Greta, gives him devastating news. Burrell drank himself to death, with 9 years still on his clock. Sylvia starts to panic again, but Will spots her expensive earrings and drags her to a pawn shop. The owner is about to close, but changes his mind when he sees the value of the jewelry. Sensing their desperation, he only offers 2 days of time. It's unfair, but they have no choice, they take it. Next, they find a payphone. Will make Sylvia call her home, so he can speak to Leon. He demands a ransom, 1,000 years, to be distributed among the poor in the ghetto. But Leon isn't fazed. Instead, he warns Will that he's becoming too much like his father. Then, he drops a shocking truth. Will's father didn't die in a time fight, as he believed. He was involved in something far more dangerous. Will hangs up. Meanwhile, Leon informs Sylvia's parents about the ransom, but Weiss hesitates. What is mere pocket change to him is still too much to give away. Will take Sylvia to his apartment for the night, where she changes into Rachel's old clothes. She asks him about his father, and Will explains that his dad was an expert time fighter who taught him how to win by letting his opponent think they had the upper hand, waiting until the last second before turning the tables. Will once believed his father died in a fight, but now he suspects he was killed for giving away his winnings. They share their experiences from their 25th birthdays. While Will struggled to survive from the moment his timer started, Sylvia woke up peacefully in bed, gifted a decade by her father. The next morning, Will watches the timeline building, hoping to see signs of charity. But there's none. Weiss didn't pay the ransom. Sylvia, heartbroken by her father's greed, finally understands that his wealth came from crushing others. Will tells her to go home, but she refuses. Instead, they decide to team up and seal their agreement with a kiss. Sylvia still wants to call home, so Will hands her a gun for protection while he watches from a distance. When her father picks up, he ignores her anger and warns her that the timekeepers are coming. Just then, Sylvia spots Leon sneaking up on Will. Without hesitation, she shoots him in the arm. Will checks Leon's timer and realizes timekeepers don't carry much time. This keeps them from becoming targets for thieves. Instead of leaving Leon to die, Will gives him some time so his fellow officers can save him. As Will and Sylvia escape in Leon's car, he stumbles through the streets, facing the fury of the people he failed to protect. Luckily, his fellow timekeeper arrives just in time to rescue him. Later, Sylvia points out that they can't keep driving a stolen police car. That gives Will an idea. A man pretends to be a timekeeper to stop a car on the road. As soon as it halts, he and his partner steal a wealthy woman's earrings and drain most of her time, leaving her with only 1 day to live. Then, they speed off in her car. Once they're far from the city, they stop to watch the news and realize they're now wanted criminals. Will urges Sylvia to go back, but she refuses. She finds this life far more exciting. Meanwhile, Weiss tries to calm his investors, lying that everything is under control. But Leon shows up with bad news. This isn't a kidnapping anymore. Sylvia is now being hunted as a criminal too. Weiss offers Leon a bribe, but Leon rejects it, warning that if Sylvia contacts him, he must report it, or he'll be arrested as an accomplice. Later, Sylvia asks Will if he would really give away time if he had it. When he says yes, she comes up with a bold plan. The two hijack a Weiss money truck and crash it into a time bank, stealing as many time capsules as they can. The rest, they leave for the poor in the ghetto. By the time the timekeepers arrive, the bank is empty. That evening, Will secretly leaves a time capsule in Greta's laundry as an apology. He also visits Maya, who is sleeping on the streets, and gives her extra time. The rest of the stolen time goes to the timeline, where a clerk distributes it to those in need. Back at the timekeeper's office, Leon notices an irregular time flow. He suspects Will might be hurting the very people he's trying to help. The next morning, Fortis attempts to rob a man, but this time, the victim fights back with a gun. Fortis pretends to let him go, only to shoot him in the back. When he checks the man's timer, he's shocked. He just wasted a lot of time. Meanwhile, Will and Sylvia go on a spree, robbing time banks everywhere. Their faces flood the news. Weiss, watching in disbelief, wonders if his own daughter is trying to destroy him. His wife reminds him he nearly killed her first by suffocating her. A week later, Leon and his team finally track down Will's apartment. They prepare to storm in, but Will hears their radio chatter just in time. Grabbing Sylvia, he bolts, dashes into another apartment, and leaps through a window. They land safely on a car below, escaping once again. Leon spots them and immediately gives chase through the city. When Will and Sylvia take to the rooftops, Leon fires at them. Will shoots back but misses, forcing them to climb down and escape on a bus. The driver considers turning them in, but Will bribes him to keep quiet, leaving Leon behind. Hours later, they check into a hotel, paying extra to book all the rooms and ensure the receptionist doesn't talk. But when a new guest arrives, he's told the hotel is full. Before leaving, he catches a glimpse of Will and Sylvia heading upstairs. Meanwhile, Fortis and his men terrorize the streets, demanding information. At first, people stay silent, wanting to protect their saviors, until Fortis kills a man to make a point. Fear takes over, and the hotel guest confesses what he saw. At the hotel, Will and Sylvia learn the bounty on their heads is just 10 years, an insult. Suddenly, Fortis and his men storm in, guns drawn. Fortis explains that the timekeepers let him operate because he only robs his own kind, but now he must restore order. He claims he doesn't enjoy killing in cold blood, so he challenges Will to a time fight. Using a trick his father taught him, Will distracts Fortis by making him check his timer. Seizing the moment, Will drains all of Fortis's time. The guards watch in shock, giving Will the opening to take them out and let Fortis time out permanently. By the time the timekeepers arrive, Will and Sylvia are long gone. Hours later, Will realizes their small-time robberies aren't enough. Prices and loan rates are rising faster to compensate. They need 1,000,000 years to make a real impact. Luckily, Sylvia knows exactly where to find that kind of time. The next day, Weiss is on high alert, surrounded by extra bodyguards. Suddenly, Sylvia appears, claiming she wants to surrender. Weiss takes the bait, letting his guard down. That's when Will sneaks up from behind, turning the tables and taking Weiss hostage. Will and Sylvia take Weiss to his office, forcing him to open the safe that holds a capsule with 1,000,000 years of time. Weiss warns them that giving a year to 1,000,000 people will only prolong their suffering, and flooding the wrong zone with so much time could bring down the entire system. But that's exactly what Will wants. They lock Weiss in his office and escape. As soon as the timekeepers hear about the robbery, they rush to stop them, blocking the bridge to prevent their return to the ghetto. Leon is also on their tail, but he becomes so focused on the chase that he forgets to collect his daily time allowance. The timekeepers fire at Will and Sylvia, but Will ignores the bullets and speeds through the time zone barrier, making it back to the ghetto. Leon crashes his car into theirs, but Will quickly jumps out and hands the capsule to Maya. Then he and Sylvia pretend to surrender. Leon smirks, thinking he's won. But just then, the timeline announces that there's now enough time for everyone. A massive crowd floods the streets, blocking Leon's way. Will and Sylvia use the chaos to escape. Leon shoves people aside and rushes back to his car, but when they cross another barrier, he's forced to continue on foot. Eventually, he catches up to them. Will realizes that Leon must have grown up in the ghetto too. Leon confirms it, saying he worked hard to escape, just like everyone else should. He prepares to arrest them, but Will points out that they're running out of time anyway. They only have a few minutes left to live. Leon checks his own timer and panics. He forgot to collect his pay. Before he can do anything, his time runs out and he collapses, dead on the spot. Will and Sylvia have only seconds left. They kiss, preparing for the end. But then Will spots Leon's car. There's still time stored in it. He sprints to the vehicle and grabs what he can. Sylvia, slower than him, nearly runs out of time, but Will rushes back just in time. They meet in the middle, holding hands, sharing time, and surviving. Meanwhile, back at the company, Weiss realizes it's all over. Defeated, he tells his employees to stand down. The system has collapsed. News reports across the country show crowds flooding the streets. Factories have shut down, and desperate people are sneaking across the zones, trying to reach New Greenwich. The authorities insist they have everything under control, but everyone knows the system is on the brink of collapse. At the timekeeper's office, the workers give up and go home. There's nothing left for them to do. Meanwhile, Will and Sylvia remain free, hitting even bigger banks to make sure the old system never returns.